And welcome to Maya 2013-101, where we will be going over the fundamentals of Maya as we create an entire animated project from scratch. Now, during tonight's class, my goal is to give you sort of a crash course in how Maya works. You're actually going to be kind of let off the hook early. I don't mean that the class will end early. In fact, class may very well run over by a little bit. It's a little hard to say. But during this session, and this session alone, you actually won't be getting any homework. This is the 1 week where you're given a little bit of time to sort of acquaint yourself with the software first. Because really tonight's job is I'm going to be going over what Maya is. We're going to talk a lot about its interface, about how it works, about how to manipulate 3D objects, and a lot of the kind of stuff where if I gave you an assignment, it would really be something like just throw some 3D objects into a scene. And a lot of stuff that I think you can do on your own and do some nice exploration of. Now, as we move forward in the coming weeks, we will be creating an entire animated project, albeit a fairly simple one. And during that process, you will have weekly assignments that are going to take you through this entire process. So when we model out our scene, you'll have an assignment to get everything modeled out on your own. When we texture it, you'll have an assignment to texture it, and so on and so forth. And that's how it's all going to break up. The class will culminate with the creation of an entire rendered scene, which we will composite together, and you'll be able to put up on YouTube or send out to all of your friends and show them how amazingly awesome you are. Now, before we actually get started on tonight's course, and no, right now, actually, I do not have a preview, but I will have one before we get to the next class. So, before we actually get rolling with the class, there are some things I want to talk to you about how these classes work, get some explanation out of the way, and of course, if you have any questions along the way, please make sure to voice those. And before we, actually, let's just start right there. If you have an official question that you want me to address in the class, do not put it over inside of BuzzNet. Now, hopefully all of you who are listening to the sound of my voice are currently logged into BuzzNet. If you are not, you need to point your web browser to buzznet.3dbuzz.com. You do not need the www. Just make sure to jump to buzznet.3dbuzz.com and put in your 3D Buzz credentials, and that will log you in. This is the chat area for the class. This is where you can talk amongst each other. It's also where I keep track of who is actually participating and following along. However, questions that come up in BuzzNet are often overlooked. They often get lost inside of chat, and it's very difficult for me to keep up with them. So there is a question system available as a part of the webinar itself. If you have an official question that you want addressed, make sure that you put it over there. Now, let's see. Terry Jackson just said, should I be able to hear you guys at this point? Can everybody hear me over there in BuzzNet right now? I'm probably going to get a bunch of yeses. So the answer is yes. NATO, if you could kindly just reply back to him and just say, oh, you already have. Yes, you should be able to hear us right now. So he's obviously got some sort of an audio problem going on, which I hate to hear that. But that does lead me to my next point. Each and every one of these classes is going to be recorded and put up for your streaming pleasure later on. So if for any reason you're following along and you need to duck out, somebody let's set your stove on fire, or you forget to go do something, you are welcome to leave at any point and just pick up with the video later on. That's perfectly fine. Now that leads me to the question of attendance, which I will actually get to here in just a moment. So let's start off with some notes. Oh, goodness. I'm going to let my Wacom tablet kind of wake up and realize that I want to use it. How the class works. First off, BuzzNet, as most of you have already seen. You can grab this, or you can access it, really. You're not downloading anything. It's all a web app. This is, of course, at buzznet.3dbuzz.com. So let's make sure everybody's aware of that. Second, our weekly schedule. This class meets twice a week, but it's important for you to understand that during the same week, the class is actually a repeat. What we're doing is we're holding the same class twice to accommodate as many people as we can across multiple time zones. So this particular class meets at 7 p.m. CDT on Tuesdays and at 3 p.m. CDT on Thursdays. The Tuesday and Thursday class are identical, so you'll see the same content. You're welcome to attend both, because really there are going to be little tiny differences here and there. I don't think I've ever taught the exact same class twice in a row. There's always some little thing that changes, or some explanation which was given, or somebody asks a question in one class that wasn't asked in the other one. So there will be subtle differences, but the key principle, the idea, is that they're essentially the same class that we're going to be running twice in a row. Okay, so another point that I want to bring up is certificates. Probably you already know this. If you didn't, this class does offer a certificate of completion when it is finished. Now, this certificate of completion is digital. We are not going to send you an actual piece of paper. It is, however, a high-resolution, print-worthy file that you can load into your favorite color printer and make your very own version of and frame it or whatever you'd like to do with it. But there are some stipulations that you must adhere to if you'd like to receive a certificate. The first is you must meet an attendance requirement. And that requirement is actually pretty lenient. You must attend 50% of the classes. Now, classes that meet in the same week don't count. So, naturally, this is a 6-week class, meaning we're going to meet a total of 12 times. But if you only come for every class for Tuesday and Thursday during the first 3 weeks, or the first 2 weeks, that doesn't really count. Because, if you meet, you're here today, you're here on Tuesday. If you show up on Thursday, that won't really help your attendance, because you've already attended this session. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Now, here's the great thing about it. I'm just going to throw this at you and, do with it what you will. We do not require you to stay for a certain amount of time. As long as you log in, as long as you are here at some point, even for just a few moments, the system is actually going to register you as having attended. Now, if you'd like to use that to your advantage, that's perfectly fine. But the fact of the matter is you're probably going to need to pay attention to the lecture on some level. So as long as you, jump in for a few minutes and you want to catch the video later, that's fine. That'll still work out in your favor. If you aren't attending all of the classes, if you do not meet the requirement of attending 50% of the sessions, then you will not receive a certificate. And I'm really sorry if that puts a damper on people. I know some of you have very busy schedules and whatnot, and I know things come up. But really, as long as you log in, at least for a moment, then you get credit for that class. So we're trying to help you out as much as we can. Next, the other requirement for a certificate is your homework. Now, I've already said, this week you guys are getting a little bit of a pass. My goal this week is to just get you up to speed. Tonight you're going to get sort of a crash course on Maya to get you at least passingly comfortable with the software. What I would recommend after tonight, I'm not going to require a quantifiable assignment from them. I'm just going to basically suggest that it's in your best interest, and those of you who want to learn this will do it. Those of you who just kind of want everything spoon-fed, you probably won't, and that's really between you and your learning curve. It would be good for you to just play with the software. Do some of the things that we do tonight, create some objects, move some objects around. If you want to dabble here and there with maybe practicing modeling or creating something, by all means go ahead. You're not going to break it. As long as you're not going into Maya's system files and randomly deleting stuff, you're never going to break Maya, so don't be scared of it. Just jump right in and start doing things, which will be a lot easier after tonight once we go over some of the basics. Now, homework itself is its own topic. There's a lot of things that we need to kind of discuss in order for homework to really make sense to everybody. Now, just if you don't mind, because everybody who's hearing me right now should also be logged into BuzzNet. If you would, let me know via BuzzNet how many of you have never taken one of these 3D Buzz live classes before. You can give me a yes or some sort of affirmative answer over inside of BuzzNet. Okay, there's a couple of people. There's a few people. Oh, yeah, that's great. Okay, so this is going to be really important to all of you. Please pay attention. Our homework delivery system, for the time being, is dependent on Dropbox. you need to go to Dropbox.com and make a free account. The free account is really all you need. If you are already using Google Drive, I'm really sorry. We've already set up our system based off of Dropbox. So go ahead and set up a Dropbox account and then use all your Google Drive stuff for the personal things like I do. And then save your Dropbox specifically for your 3D Buzz assignments. Now, the way in which you will send in your homework has already been spelled out very clearly in this thread, and you might want to jot this down or point a browser at it and bookmark it for later just so that you know. But if you go over to the 3D Buzz Member Sponsor Lounge, among the stickies at the very top of the list is the Master Live Classes Homework Submission Steps. Read this carefully. Don't just read the highlighted stuff. Don't just read the orange text or the red text. Actually read the whole thing. Read it all. Because once you do this, you'll know exactly how you're supposed to submit all of your homework. And if you don't, well, then you'll be like, well, how am I supposed to get this to you? And then I'm probably going to have to make fun of you, and it may actually have to be public in class. So take a moment, read this, and you'll see how this works. Now, you guys will be sending your requests and your homework. So the first step is to set up your Dropbox by way of a PM. You guys will be sending that to NATO Chris JM. That's Chris Morris. If you jump into this thread, you can just click right on his name, and that will automatically open up a PM box and save you a whole bunch of hassle. All you need to put into this PM is going to be the email that you have associated with your Dropbox account. And of course, we've given you a subject line. It needs to be Dropbox account, and in this case, it would be Maya 101. So make sure that you handle that accordingly. Again, you guys will be sending these to NATO. Now, NATO is actually with us tonight. Chris, you there, man? Chris? Maybe he's...
Hello.
Oh, hello. Just say hi to everybody. Let everybody know you're there.
Hello.
Now, Chris is...
Hello, I'm here.
Yes, he is. Yes, you're there. Chris is going to be my TA for this class, meaning he's going to be dealing with all of your assignments and helping you guys out in any way he can. He has a keyboard which sounds a lot like a submachine gun. And
really picked that up?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Very, very well, actually. In fact, I don't even know if they could hear me speak over it. That's how loud it is. So, yeah, apparently the lag is pretty bad right now, but that's just because he's all the way over in the UK. Okay, so please, once again, read this so that you know how homework is going to work in terms of submission steps. If you have questions about that process, you can shoot them to me or Chris, and we will get you squared away as quickly as possible. Okay, now, next thing, is there anything else? No, I think really that's the big bulk of it in terms of how the class works. The rest of it you've already figured out up to this point. Keep it on the live classes calendar for the password to pop up just a few minutes before class actually begins. And the rest is really going to take care of itself. So that leads us to tonight. Tonight is what I'm considering the Maya crash course. Now, is there anybody in the audience right now who would consider themselves to be completely new to Maya? I'm just curious. You can answer me right inside of BuzzNet so that I know. There's a couple of people, a few people. Okay. Well, hopefully you've all got Maya up and running. I did hear recently, and this actually took me a bit by surprise, that you are able to get the student license of Maya, which is 1 year, I believe, including any updates. Certainly, I think it includes any updates. I'm not trying to speak for Autodesk anyway, but you can get that just for taking part in this class. And that, oh, it's for 3 years now. Okay, it used to be 1. So that is really, really cool. I did not expect that. So make sure that if you need that for some reason, if you're still using like Maya 2012 or anything earlier than that, that you go over to Autodesk website and you can get the student license. You may need to contact somebody, but you should be able to pull it off because somebody already did. Okay, so now from here. Tonight in the Maya crash course, we have several things we need to cover. The first thing, however, is pretty basic, and that's the concept of 3D space. Now, I don't even really need to open Maya in order to do this. Most of you are at least passingly familiar with the idea of a grid. You've probably already seen one at some point. A grid is really just, a series of lines that go one way and a series of lines that go another way. And usually these, when laying flat on a desk or something, are two-dimensional, where you have one axis that goes this way, one axis that goes that way. Usually the horizontal axis is X, the vertical axis is Y. In Maya, you have the same thing, but you have a third axis, of course, because this is a 3D piece of software. You have an X-axis, you have a Y-axis, and you have a Z-axis. Now, if any of you just fell asleep and you're like, oh my god, we're actually going all the way back to the basics of 3D space, this is more important than you probably think, because Maya uses a world in which the Y-axis points up and down. And not all pieces of software do that. If you're coming to Maya from, say, Blender, or 3ds Max, or any number of other pieces of software, including things like the UDK, if you want to make your own games, then those are going to have the Z-axis point up and down. But in Maya, it's the Y-axis. Now, that said, you can change it. I do not recommend that you do this. I will show you how to change it if somebody reminds me, because I'm not going to do it right this second. So just remind me a little bit later, and I'll show you how to change the up axis in Maya to Z instead of Y. But again, I'm going to stress, I recommend you don't do this. There are several tools and features inside of Maya that are still kind of coded in such a way that they were expecting the Y axis to point up and down. So if you are sending out from Maya into another application that uses a Z-up world, 9 times out of 10, in every case that I've seen, there is something along the conversion path as you're exporting, something along the export path that is going to convert it for you, so that you don't really have to worry too much about it. And sometimes there are scripts which help you handle it as well. Just please be aware, just more than anything else, that Maya is a Y-up world. If you are coming to this from another application that is Z-up, that will take an extra moment for you to get your head around. And for that, all I can do is just kind of apologize. It's just how they coded it, okay? I had nothing to do with it. Quit giving me a hard time about it. Okay, now these axes, as you probably know, go in a positive and a negative direction. So that the center of your 3D grid is actually going to be 0, 0, 0, and you can go in positive or negative directions from there. That is the three-dimensional grid that we'll be playing with the whole time that we're working inside of Maya. Also, another little factoid about Maya's default settings, and maybe you've already played with all of your preferences, and maybe you've already changed this, or maybe you haven't. But by default, and I'm going to write that down, by default, Maya uses centimeters as its basic unit. So, and anytime you're working in Maya and it says, I want to move this object up 3 units, you're moving it in centimeters by default. Now, you can change that. You can make it work in inches, feet, kilometers, millimeters, whatever you want. It's very, very flexible. But by default, it's all in centimeters. So definitely know that. Also, kind of backtracking just a little bit, only because I'm so busy writing stuff down and drawing all these really, killer doodles and everything. But there is one last thing about the class I guess I kind of want to wedge in here if you guys will allow me to, and that is the concept of notes. Generally, if I am writing stuff down on this board, it's because it's probably a good idea for you to know it. If you have before you a notebook and a pen, that's probably a good idea. If I were in your shoes, I would keep a notebook with me at all times. And anything that I write down, it may be a good idea for you to write down as well. So definitely be aware of that. Now, I generally do not answer many questions from BuzzNet, but I did see someone say, has the UI changed from 2012 to 2013? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Generally speaking, in the great big grand scheme of things, Maya looks the same now in 2013 as it did back in Maya 3 when I was first learning it. So just food for thought there. They haven't changed it that much in, I get to date myself now, about the 12 years I've been using it, give or take. Okay, so, yeah, I know, it's 2,000 different versions of Maya in between then and there. It's great how they changed their numbering system. Okay, so all of this stuff, all of this Y-up stuff, this 3D space stuff, this default space being in centimeters kind of thing, I need you to know that, of course, because we're working in 3D space, but is it absolutely critical that you all be masters of, three-dimensional trigonometry and stuff? Yes, and if you are not a master of three-dimensional trigonometry, then you're never going to be any good at 3D. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. But anything that you do know about 3D space, and of course, three-dimensional mathematics is probably going to be a boon to you as we move forward. Okay. I scared somebody for a minute. That's awesome. I have power. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is get everybody who can, and I saw a couple of people, at least one person, who's still installing Maya. And, I realize that we don't have webcams, and you can't see my face, but hopefully you can at least picture me staring at you and shaking my head in disdain that you don't already have Maya started and running and installed right now. So there you go. And if you have Maya 2012 open, that will be close enough for government work. But there are a few things that you won't see that I'll at least touch on or at least mention as we move through this. So my goal, real quick, is to get you through the Maya user interface. Now, real quick, I'm just curious, because I know some of you said you're totally new to Maya. In BuzzNet, is there anybody who has opened up Maya, stared at this interface, and just become scared out of their minds by what they saw? Does this interface scare anybody? Just let me know. Too many buttons. Yeah, a lot of people are afraid of this. Here's the news. The interface for Maya is actually not that bad. I have seen much, much worse. If you need to see worse yourself, see if you can dig up an old copy of TrueSpace. That had, as far as I'm concerned, one of the worst interfaces ever. Okay. Now, let's start at the very, very beginning, okay? This interface is broken up into some key areas. You need to know what they are, and you need to be able to remember them by name. So what I'm going to do is be doing a little bit of jumping back and forth so that you can be at least passingly familiar with the names of things, but I'll give you guys a cheat, okay? If you want to. If you take a really close look at this interface, you see all these little tiny spots. They're kind of hidden all over the place that look like little dot patterns. Like there's one here in the upper left corner, and there's one right down here, and there's one right over here as well. Right-click on these, and this will give you a nice little cheat list of all the different pieces of the interface. You may not know where everything is, but as I start calling these out, you're going to find that they're all included in this list. That's just in case you need to write these down. You're like, hey, what did he say earlier? Was it attribute editor or channel box or what? You'll be able to see a list that you can call up. Just right-click on these little dot areas. Okay, starting at the very top, you have the main menu bar. Super exciting, right? Well, here's the great thing about the menu bar inside of Maya. It's big. It's really, 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 really big. In fact, the main menu bar of Maya is so big they couldn't fit the whole thing on the interface. So what they've done is they've divided the main menu bar up into what are called menu sets, which you can change and adapt based on what you're doing. So if you're making some models out of polygons, or you're actually doing some modeling work of some kind, you have the polygon menu set. But let's say later on you're animating. You see this little drop down here on the left-hand side of the screen? You maybe set this over to animation. And your menus update. You have an entirely different menu bar. Well, not entirely different. Some of the things actually stayed the same. But the idea is that you toggle through all of these menu sets to see all of the different menus. Now, I never use this drop down over here, I'll admit. These are all slave to hotkeys. And if you'd like to know what the hotkeys are, they are as follows, and I'll slow down my rate of speech in case somebody starts writing this down. If you press the F2 key, you're in the animation menu set. F3 takes you to polygons. F4 takes you to surfaces. F5 takes you to dynamics, that's particles and explosions and stuff like that. And F6 is rendering. So really it all just bases, that's just whatever you're doing. If you know you're animating, you might want to be in the animation menu set. If you're making a polygon model, you'll probably want to be in the polygon modeling set. And so on and so forth. Now, do I expect you to remember all of those menu sets and all the buttons for them right now? Well, yes, actually. I do want you to know. Okay. If it takes you a minute to wrap your head around, don't be too alarmed. It does take a minute for you to remember what menu set you need to be in for any given thing. Because I will warn you, there is just a little tiny bit of cross-pollination that happens. Now, all of that said, there are some menus here that never change. So at least you have something stable that you can look at all times. You got the File menu. This has a lot of the things you'll find in the File menu of just about any application you've ever touched in your entire life. Things like New and Open and Save As, Import and Export and all kinds of stuff like that. Also your recent files. That will save you a lot of pain and hassle, actually. Next, we have the Edit menu. Undo and Redo, your two biggest friends right here. It's funny, too. They've actually put Redo back on Control-Y. That's awesome. So we have Undo and Redo. Please make note of the hotkeys for those, and note that they're not entirely honest with the hotkey here. Because really, as far as I'm concerned, Undo may be the single most important hotkey in all of Maya. So what I'm going to do real quick, and I'm cheating all kinds of different ways. I'm using hotkeys like mad, but if you do something you didn't want to do, you do not have to hit Control-Z. You can just tap the Z key. And you can go ahead and get used to that now if you want to. You also have Shift-Z for redo. So those are the old hotkeys. Apparently they've put Control-Y in there for redo and Control-Z and everything. That's the new school way. If you guys want to be all old school and awesome about it, you don't have to hit any modifiers. You can just hit the Z key to undo and Shift-Z to redo. I'll just point those out real early on so that everybody's totally aware. Anyway, so now back over here. You have things like cut, copy, paste, delete. One of the big things that you'll need to keep in mind is delete by type history. Don't worry about what that is, what it does, or why it's there. Just remember that I said that. I said that deleting history was important. Take that and run with it. All right, next we have the Modify menu. Now the Modify menu is here just to make various changes to objects. You can move stuff around, you can align objects, you can convert objects from one type to another. All kinds of stuff that I don't expect you to know much about right now. The Create menu. Well, this is a dead giveaway. It helps you make stuff. You can create things. So let's say everybody, if you're watching this right now and you have Maya open, I want everybody to click on the Create menu. Then go down to Polygon Primitives, and I want you to click on any one of these that you like. I don't really care which one you click. Just know that no matter which one you click on, something is going to happen in the middle of your viewport. You're going to get some instructions. It'll say drag the diameter, so it'll tell you all kinds of different stuff. You'll probably have to drag, and then it'll tell you to do something else, and then it'll tell you to do something else. Maya is going to do its best to guide you through whatever you need to do to create whatever it is you wanted to just make, by giving you those on-screen tooltips. Now those are there by default. You can turn them off, but we're not going to worry about that right now. For now, let me go ahead and just delete that. So the Create menu, it's here to make stuff. There's all kinds of different things you can make. We'll talk about some of that as we go through the class. Display shows and hides things. That's as generic as I want to go. Like the very top thing, the grid. Do you want to see the grid? Yes or no? Next, we have the Window menu. This will bring up various parts of the user interface that you can't see right now. And some of them that you can, actually. But really, the big thing I want to point out about the Window menu is that it allows you access to a lot of the hidden parts of the interface. Because if any of you saw this interface and you were afraid, don't worry, there's more where that came from. You're actually seeing a very small percentage of Maya's interface. Now finally we have the Assets menu. We're not going to really pour too much into this in this particular class, but the concept of an asset is that you take an entire collection of things, be it a character and his set, or maybe an entire set that you're going to shoot a movie in with all the different buildings and all the different props and all the other different things that make it into what it is, and you combine those into a single unified object that you can create some controls on. It's a very neat thing, but not something we're going to talk about. Now, the only reason I went through those particular menus, and those are all I'm going to go through, believe it or not, there's just File, Edit, Modify, Create, Display, Window, and Assets, is because those are your constant menus. Those are always there. Everything else is going to change based on your current menu set. So notice, starting here at the Animate menu, if I hit F3 to go to polygons, everything changes. F4, everything changes again. F5, everything changes again. And F6, it all changes one final time. Now, I will jump to the very end. There is one more constant menu. He just wiggles around a lot, and that's the Help menu. Please do not be afraid of the Help menu. I will say this, Maya used to have some pretty sad help files way back in the day. After Autodesk picked them up, a few years after Autodesk picked them up, it became much better, and the Maya help file is actually pretty good. It may not be quite as good as 3ds Max's of old was, but it's still pretty good. And yes, I totally understand that if everybody read the help file, you probably wouldn't need to be sitting here right now, but you know what? Not everybody does read the help file, so don't be scared of it. So all of that, everything we just talked about is part of the main menu bar. So let's jump over to Photoshop. And let's see, let me draw a line, and another line, and another line, and I don't know why Photoshop wanted to do that, but you know, we'll just go with it. We're not all that picky about stuff. I'm pretty laid back most of the time. So this guy, this is the main menu bar. Now, let's move down the interface. There's this next line of stuff. Right down here. Now, in most applications, what would you call this? Anybody want to? I'll get some interaction going. What would you call this in most applications? Anybody, just take a guess. Throw a rock at it. See if you get close. The basic toolbar. Kierek was right. Kyrek, I guess? However you pronounce that. Kyrek would actually get the cookie tonight. Now, I like to give out virtual cookies to people who are following along and being all nice and interactive with me. So, Kyrek, you're right. This would be the basic toolbar. In Maya, this has a special name. This is called the status line. And you should be aware of that, and you should remember that name. This is the status line. Why is it called the status line? I guess because the word toolbar is just boring. I don't know. That's what they decided to call it. So let's take a quick rundown of the status line and what it's here for. The primary goal of the status line is not really to be a toolbar at all. It's to show you what state Maya is currently in. Now, it has some functionality which will remind you pretty solidly of a toolbar from time to time, but that's really not why it's here. And here's what I mean. So, okay, at the very first bit, we have the current menu set we're in. We already saw how we could change this, but think about this not from a toolbar standpoint, but what is this really doing? This is making sure that you are aware of the current state of the main menu bar, or the status of the main menu bar. So there's one way this is acting more like a status line than an actual toolbar. Now next to this we have some very simple buttons. We have New, Open, and Save. They're pretty straightforward. The icons mostly say it all. Now, next to this, I want to show you something else too. You see these little tiny dividers? Looks like a little tiny line with a little rectangle in the middle of it. These are collapsible sections. So if there's any part of the status line that you don't want to see, you don't think you're going to use, or you just want to get out of your face for a minute, you can collapse all of those down. So we'll go and just collapse everything. We'll just go bit by bit. So our second section, this is our selection mask. This allows us to decide what it is we want to be able to select. Do we want to be able to select all objects, or only objects that have to do with animation, or maybe just polygon models, or maybe just NURB surfaces? And if you don't know what a NURB surface is, that's fine. My point is this. If for some reason you're using Maya, you're having a good old time, things are going really well, and suddenly you realize that you can't select anything, or whatever it is you're trying to click, you can't select it for some reason. The very first place your eyes should cut to is the status line. Because the status line will tell you what's going on and what you should be able to select and what you shouldn't. Now let me go ahead and expand this all back out. Here's an example. If I was to create a polygon cylinder, just because it's there. But then I take my selection mask and we set this to NURB surfaces. Look at this. I'm clicking on this guy like a fiend and I can't select him. So let me go ahead and set that back to all objects, and suddenly I can select him again. So definitely be aware of things like that. Now, next to this, we have some more selection settings that we can use. Do we want to be able to be in object mode or component mode? I'm not going to worry too much about this button. We're going to keep this vaguely simple. We have two primary modes when we are working with objects in the 3D view. We can be working in object mode or component mode. Now, components is a big, long discussion. I don't want to get too far into it, but I will say this. Is there anybody here, anybody in the room who has no idea what a polygon is? I figure with gaming, especially 3D gaming being such a big thing, most folks know these days generally what a polygon is. Okay, that's good. Well, I'm not getting any people raising their hand or anything. So we'll assume that everybody knows what a polygon is. Well, real quick, I'm going to draw a polygon cube. Maybe not the best cube ever, but, you know, it's a polygon cube. Now, this polygon cube is made up of some things that you're going to have to be at least passingly familiar with. It is made up of vertices. I can't spell. Sometimes when I'm writing, I get a little carried away. So it's made of vertices. By the way, the singular of this is vertex. There is no such word as vertexes, and there is no such word as a single vertice. One vertex is called a vertex. More than one are called vertices. Thank you. Now, don't say vertexes, or I'm going to probably throw something at you. This is an edge. This guy right here is a face. And there are other kinds of components too, but the big thing to realize is that this is what makes up a polygon object. We have vertices, edges, and faces. Now, why is that important? Well, here inside the status line, we can control whether or not we want to manipulate this object as an entire object, i.e. in object mode, or do we want to work with it in component mode, or by a component type. Now, once I switch over to component mode, which is my third button here, I can actually click on individual vertices and move them around and thereby reshape this object. Right now I'm doing a little bit of modeling. It's ugly modeling, but that's what it is. When I'm finished, I can go back to object mode, and now I can work with this as one whole object. I'm not working with its components anymore. Now, the hotkey for that, for those who like hotkeys, is F8. F8 will toggle you between object mode and component mode. That is one of those hotkeys I do recommend you commit to memory early on. Now, next to this is just a series of masks to control what you can and can't select at any given time. So when you're in object mode, these buttons show one thing. When you're in component mode, they show something else entirely. And the whole idea is, do you want to be able to select geometry? Do you want to be able to select things like particles? Or maybe when you're in component mode, do you want to be able to select vertices, edges, faces, and so forth? By default, they're basically open to allow you to select just about anything. But again, I just want to mention, if for some reason you're ever in a point when you can't select something, like right now, I'm clicking like heck, I'm clicking furiously on this object and I can't select it. The very first thing you should do is look up here to your status line and check it out. Select surface objects is currently switched off. So I can turn that on. And now, I can suddenly select everything. Now, that said, all of these buttons also, you can right click on them and you can be a little more selective, but we're not going to go into all of that. Alright, moving down from here, we can lock or unlock the current selection. So if I lock this, I can't unselect this, or I can't select anything else that may be in my scene. So locking selection is very nice. It's a good thing to be aware of. Also very good to be aware when you've turned it on and when you haven't. Now, I'm going to keep things a little simple and kind of rolling. Our next thing we have is snapping. I'm not going to talk about snapping right now, but the idea is that you can snap objects to the grid, to all your grid points. You can snap them to other vertices or to curves, all kinds of things you can snap objects to when you need to move them around. We'll get into that a little bit later. I need to kind of pick things back up. Next, this little button right here has caused more hassle for me in my history of being a Maya teacher than any other button in the entire interface. So I want to take a moment and just point it out to everyone. This is the construction history on-off button. If you switch this off for some reason, several of the things that you may want to use in Maya will suddenly not work. This is almost a make Maya not work button, so definitely be wary of it. You want to leave this on pretty much at all times. In fact, if you're just getting started with Maya, I'd rather you think that you should just leave this on all the time, so that later on, after you've been using Maya for a while, you'll start to get an idea of when you might want to turn this off. But I'll give you this, I've never turned it off. Not ever. The whole time I've been using Maya, all 12 years or so that I've been playing with Maya, I've never had to use it with this off. Just so you know. All right, now, next, we have some rendering buttons. We can take a look at the last thing that was rendered, which should be nothing right now. It should be really boring. We can render our current view. That's beautiful. We can view this in the IPR renderer, which we're not going to get into right now. It's just a way for interactive rendering. And then we have the render globals. These are all of our render settings. What do we want our picture to look like, or what sort of settings we want it to have? What resolution do we need it to have, and things like that. Nothing we're going to mess with right now. We have a data entry field up here, which this is kind of like a little Swiss Army knife section. This allows you to move objects around or to rotate objects, to rename them, or select them by name. You don't really have to worry about the fact that it's here. Everything, it's almost like an extra sort of not quite convenience that if you forget about it for now, since you're just getting started in Maya, I won't beat you up. Now, far right-hand side. These buttons are passingly important, and if you overlook them, you can get really confused with the interface, especially if you've already been clicking on them and playing with them, because then you might see something really, really different. These switch on and off various parts of the interface, such as the attribute editor, which we'll talk about, the channel box and layer editor, or the tool settings, which pops up over here on the left-hand side. So these are just toggles to turn on and off various parts of the interface. By default, you should just be looking at the channel box and the layer editor. So if you need to set it back to default, that's what you want to do. So that was the status line kind of at a glance. Okay. Again, its main role is to tell you what state Maya is currently in, so that you know that you're supposed to be able to select things or not select things. Okay. Anybody really scared yet? Nobody's responding. Oh, that's good. Good. Well, don't be scared, because there's really nothing to be scared about yet. All right. Now, just lost. Hey, if you're lost, and if you have questions, ask. If it's just because, now, let's see, H. Partidas or whatever, were you the person who is still trying to install Maya? Okay, yeah, I can't keep track of who it was. But if you need to, you can always review the video later, ask questions here, and I'll help you out as much as I can. How easy is it to get everything back to the default state? Well, actually, that is pretty easy. You can just go and delete your Maya preferences file if it really came to it, and then just restart Maya, and that'll put everything right back to your defaults. You can also just restart Maya unless you've done anything too terribly dreadful. But generally speaking, it's more important to me that you know kind of what these primary states are, and you know where the big pitfalls are, so that if you're having problems, you'll know to glance up here and be like, oh, well, I can't select this object. It must be because geometry's not on, and now I can suddenly select geometry again, and that sort of thing. Now, somebody said, anyone else lose audio? Sometimes audio kicks in and out based on your personal connection. If that happens, I am very, very sorry. Okay, now, earlier, we had mentioned that the status line was something kind of like a toolbar. Well, it's not. As I mentioned, it's really more about telling you what the status of Maya is. Next, we have the shelf. And this really is like a toolbar in the classic sense, where a toolbar gives you icons you can click that perform some kind of action. The problem is that just like the main menu bar, there are so many different features inside of Maya that this is actually broken up into tabs to help you select different things. Now, you can switch over to tabs that are associated with whatever it is you're doing. So if you know you're making a polygon model, you may want to switch this over to polygons. If you don't know what these do, the tooltips will generally walk you through each one, which is great. And generally, everything you really need is going to be right there. You can also create your own shelves and your own buttons. So if there's an operation that you do a lot, that you just like a button to be able to click and use, then you can do that. For instance, when modeling with polygons, one thing I have to do a lot is delete history. And somebody says, what do you do if Maya keeps crashing? I have no idea. There's a lot of reasons why Maya could crash. Now, if you want to add a button to your shelf, all you need to do is open the appropriate shelf, and it could actually be the custom shelf if you want to. You'll notice I've got some Mel scripts up here that I've written. Let's go back over to polygons, though. And let's say I want to be able to delete history at the click of a button. I can hold down Control and Shift, and then just dig whatever I want out of the menu. So I can go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And check it out. I now have a Delete History button up here. Now, what is that actually going to do for me? Well, I'll show you real quick. You do not have to follow along with what I'm about to do, okay? But I'm going to grab some faces here, and I'm going to extrude them. And then I'll grab, I don't know, some faces here, and I'll extrude these as well. And then I'll switch over to, I don't know, vertices. We'll grab all these guys, and we'll just merge these together. Okay. Now, if you take a look at my object, several different things have all been done. We have the original polycylinder. We have a tweak where I must have adjusted some vertices. We have the first extrusion, the second extrusion, another tweak, and then we have our merge vertex. Every single operation that's been performed has been recorded as a part of our construction history. And sometimes it's good to delete this, because if this stacks up too high, Maya can get a little temperamental, depending on your actual computer. So I can now delete all this out. So go out to object mode, click on my delete history button, and now all of that stuff is gone. And we'll talk a little bit more about history as we move forward. Now, that hotkey, again, for those who want to add stuff to their own shelf, that's just holding down Control and Shift and digging whatever you want out of the menu. And that'll put it on the shelf. If for some reason you decide you don't want it anymore, middle mouse drag it to this tiny little trash can that waits up here in the corner right above the shelf, and it goes away. So there you go. Now, that's the shelf in a nutshell. Really, it's just a toolbar. It's a tabbed toolbar. It's the easiest way to look at it. It has its own editor, so you can go into the shelf editor and you can get really, really detailed with what icons it has, what the names of things are. I don't want you to worry about that at this stage of the game, though. It's a little early. Yeah, it's kind of like a ribbon bar. This was here before the ribbon bar, though. Just, you know, for the record. Okay, down the left-hand side, we have the toolbox. There's not much to say about the toolbox. You can mouse over each one of the tools and see what it does. We have the select tool, we have the lasso tool, which allows you to just draw out some sort of big selection of stuff if you want to select something in the screen. We have things like the move tool, the rotate tool, and the scale tool. I never, ever, ever click on these. In fact, I practically never use the toolbox, to be perfectly honest with you. In fact, most of the time, I have it switched off on my installations, but there it is anyway. It also allows you to split your viewport up into the quad view, or the single view, or the perspective and outliner. So you have various different panel layouts that you can select. Your previous operation is going to be visible here inside the bottom of the toolbar, or toolbox, excuse me. So again, its job is really just to make it possible for you to see the various tools you have at your fingertips. And there's really not a lot to choose from. Again, you've got things like paint selection. And why would you use paint selection? Real quick at a glance, you see all these different vertices? What if I wanted to select a bunch of them? Switch over to paint selection, and I can paint the ones that I want. Pretty nifty, huh? We have move, we have rotate, we have scale. We have the universal manipulator. I kind of hate this tool, but you know, here it is anyway. This allows you to move and to rotate and to scale based on where you click on this great big box of doom that surrounds your object. The reason I don't like it, and this is just for some of you 3D people who are maybe coming to Maya from somewhere else, the reason I don't like it is that it allows you to make transformations that are not based on your pivot point, so it makes it very difficult to animate. In short, do not ever animate with the universal manipulator tool. If you're just modeling, fine, that's great, but don't ever animate with it. We have the soft modification tool, which I don't use that much anymore because soft modification is built into the move tool. We'll talk about that much later. We have show manipulator, again, stuff we don't need right now. We have our last operation, which was to create a polygon cylinder. So these are just one-click buttons to get to various tools. I don't ever touch them, and here's why. And I'll just mention this now so that you guys will at least have heard this at some point. But I'm going to create something real quick. In fact, everybody do this so that you've touched this information at least once. Let's go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and make a cube, and just follow the steps. It'll make you drag a couple of times to make a cube. And watch this. Press the Q key. This is your select tool. Press the W key. This gives you the move tool. Press the E key. This gives you the rotate tool. and then press the R key, and this gives you the scale tool. Now, if there are any of you out there who have seen that configuration before with W, E, and R for move, rotate, and scale, there are several applications out there that now use it, but I do just kind of want to mention Maya had it first. So the big hotkeys are Q for select, W for move, E for rotate, R for scale. T is actually the show manipulator tool, which we don't really need right now, but it is there. You can just kind of keep marching across, and there it is. Okay, so there's the toolbox. I'm going to jump over the viewport. The viewport actually deserves its own discussion. All right, all the way across the interface, we have the channel box and the layer editor. The layer editor, I do not want you to worry about at this time. In short, like a brief kind of one-sentence overview, it allows you to break your scene up into a variety of layers so that you can control visibility and renderability and so forth. Nothing we need right now. It's a little bit beyond our scope. Channel box, on the other hand, is actually pretty useful. This allows you access to your primary animatable attributes of any given object. In fact, anything that can be animated is going to be listed here in the channel box, because these are, when you hear channel, you can think of it like something that can be animated. So everything listed off here can be animated in some form or fashion. I had a question come in and said, how do I get surfaces on my polygons? I only get wireframe. Ah, yes. That is with the 5 key. If you are only seeing wireframe, that's okay if all you see is wireframe right now, but you can hit 5 and you can see it solidify if you need to. And somebody said Unity and Maya work similar in controls. That's true, because Unity based a lot of its controls off of Maya. Maya had it first. I just want to keep saying that. It makes me feel good. Okay, now there are other things available in the channel box as well, such as we have the inputs for our polygon cube. So we can go back and kind of change the width that we originally set the cube to be, as well as the height and the depth. We can change the subdivisions in width and height and depth. Now, these features, these things that I'm changing, are all because of construction history. As soon as we delete our history, we're going to lose this power, this ability to change all of these things. So definitely be aware of that. Okay, so there's the channel box. Now, down here along the bottom, we have some animation controls. We have the time slider, which allows you to slide to different frames. We'll talk about animation a little bit later. Or actually, later on in the class. We have the arrange slider. This allows you to choose what range of frames you're currently looking at. Right now, it says we're looking at frames from 1 to 24. We can grab this handle and stretch it out, and now we're looking at frames from 1 to 48. Or we can set it to 35 to 48, and then take that range and slide it along the timeline. So it just allows you to focus what frames you're looking at, which will become more and more important as you get into animation. When you first get started, I'm not too surprised if you don't think you're ever going to need that, but trust me, you will. Down from here, we have the command line. This allows you to type in MEL commands if you so desire. So for instance, we could come in here and type sphere. And we just created a sphere. Look at us go. And there's all kinds of different MEL commands that one could learn that you can type right in here. You can write an entire script in here if you really, really want to. But we're not going to get too far into MEL right now. Also, anytime you do anything that gives a response from the engine, from Maya itself, you'll see a response to your scripts appear. So let me type sphere again. And there you go. Result, NURB sphere 1, and there's its shape node, make NURB sphere 1. There you have it. And at the very bottom, you have the help line. This just tries to tell you what you should be doing at any given time. He tries to keep you on task. So currently, I have the move tool selected. If I switch to the rotate tool, it tells me how that works. If I hit the Q key for the select tool, it tells me to select an object. So the whole time that you're working with Maya, if you don't know how a tool works, definitely cut your eyes down here to the bottom of the screen, and it will do its best to tell you how you should be using it. Okay, so there are the basics of the interface that you already see, except for one really, really important part that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the viewport. Now, The viewport is probably the most important window inside of Maya, the most important panel. You need this more than anything because the viewport is your window into the 3D universe. And actually, let's take a minute, let's fill out the rest of our little document here. We had the status line. Oh, I guess we shouldn't hold down shift for too long. We had, actually let me give myself a little bit more space because I write very large. So let's say we had the time slider. We had the range slider. We had the command line. I can't spell command all of a sudden. It's great. And we had the help line. Now over here, we had the toolbox. And over here, we had the channel box, which can also be swapped out for the attribute editor. We saw that very briefly. And we'll talk about that a little later. But this still leaves this guy, the viewport. And that is your window into the 3D world. Really, only while you're working in Maya is your stuff really 3D. If you're rendering out to film, I mean, once you get to the render, it's really just a 2D image at that point. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of the viewport is navigation. So how do you navigate the viewport? Viewport navigation is all about the Alt key. If you're coming to this from another 3D application, this is the only hard part you're going to have is remembering how to navigate the viewport. All you have to do is hold down the Alt key, and then you're going to use your mouse. Now, I use acronyms for the mouse buttons. LMB is for left mouse button. MMB is middle mouse button. And RMB is your right mouse button. Is there anybody in earshot right now? Is there anybody watching this video, paying attention to this class, who does not have a 3-button mouse? Let me know. Good. Hopefully that means all of you have a 3-button mouse. You need a 3-button mouse to really use Maya. And yes, even Mac users are allowed to own a 3-button mouse. I promise the Macintosh police will not come and put the beat down on you. I know there was a fear there for a while that if you had a Mac, you're really only allowed to have 1 button. Or maybe no buttons because you have that special magic mouse or something. But trust me, you are allowed to join the real world and step away from the glitz over functionality world of Mac, and you can have a 3-button mouse. It is possible. So if you don't have one, spend, I think, the $5 it'll cost you on Amazon plus shipping to get yourself a 3-button mouse, even the most basic one. And that's enough Mac hate for a while. I'm teasing on the Mac hate stuff. I just do that to get a rise out of folks. Okay, so first off, hold down the Alt key. Left mouse is going to tumble. I'm writing this down because I think it'd be nice for you to write it down, by the way. Middle mouse is going to pan. Right mouse is going to zoom. And actually, technically, this is dollying. Anybody know the difference? Anybody in BuzzNet know the difference between zooming and dollying? At NATO, you be quiet. Somebody tell me what the difference is. Who gets the cookie? There you go. SJC2112 actually got it. Dolly is actually moving the camera. So yeah, zooming is just changing your field of view. The zooming, and then dollying is moving. I think I said that right. If I didn't, then ignore me. Okay, so let's take a look at these. Hold down the Alt key. Left mouse drag. You are tumbling. It is neat. Middle mouse drag. You're panning. Basically, you're sliding the view around. Right mouse drag, and you're dollying in and out. Now, if you want to be all old school about it, if you want to go use the really, really old configuration from Maya, I don't know, I think it was like Maya 7 is when they finally got rid of this. You can hold down Alt, and left and middle mouse together will also zoom. That's kind of a legacy hotkey for those of you who just want to feel cool, like you're, part of the old school elite. Because for a while, that's how you had to do it. It used to be left to tumble, middle to pan, and then left and middle to zoom. And that gave too many people hand cramps, and somebody at Alias or Autodesk was saying, like, we're not really using the right mouse button for anything. And so suddenly they put right mouse for zoom too, which is great. Made me very happy. Now, there are a couple of other features for the viewport you need to be aware of. Your F key will frame up on your selected object. The A key will zoom up on everything. So if I have several different objects in the scene, for instance, I have all these different objects. I can select one of them and hit F and frame up on that one. Or I can hit A and it'll fit everything into the view. So make sure you know the difference between the two. That also works on components. So if I switch over to vertices here and I grab one vertex and hit F, that frames us up right on that vertex. Now, I did get a question. Why would you want to zoom instead of dolly or vice versa? Really, that would be more of a filmmaking question. Because when you change your field of view, you're also having an effect on the overall scene depth. For instance, if you have a camera that has a really long lens, so that you're zoomed out really, really far, you'll find that your scenes, the pictures that you take, seem to have very, very little depth to them, as opposed to the shorter lenses, say around 35 millimeter and lower, which seem to have a great deal of depth to them. So really, for the most part, if you're just working in 3D space, if you're just doing stuff, if you're modeling and shaping and building your 3D sets, etc. and so forth, you're just going to want a dolly. The only time I can imagine you'd ever really want to adjust your field of view and do a real zoom in would be if you're doing something in your animation where it makes sense to make the audience feel like you've zoomed in, like with a real world camera. Like if you want to do that whole Battlestar Galactica sort of thing where you do a flash zoom up on one quick thing just to point it out to the audience, that sort of stuff. Now, there are also some viewport modes you need to be aware of. You have wireframe. This is on the 4 key, the number 4, right along the top of your keyboard. 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded, 6 is textured, and I don't have any textures on here, so I have no real way to show that unless I create one real quick. And 7 is lit, and I currently have no lights, so that's very boring. If I was to create a light, let's go to Create, Lights, make a point light. Suddenly, this starts doing stuff. As I move this light around, you can see the response. And that's because I've hit the 7 key to go into lit mode. If I just hit 6 for textured, no such luck. If I just hit 5, well, then we lose all our textures anyway, which we don't even have any. All right, fine, let me make a quick texture. Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. And let's just do this as fast as I can. Let's make a Phong. And then show both the top and bottom because it's more fun this way, right? Let's bring in a checker and we'll connect that to color. And we'll move this kind of out of our way, and I'll just middle mouse drag that onto one of these boxes. That's all I really needed to do. And let's close this. If you didn't follow along with that, that's okay. You don't have to. The idea, though, is that when you hit the 6 key, you'll get to see any textures that you may have applied. If you hit 5, you don't. 7 just toggles whether or not you see lighting. So check this out. I can hit 5 and then 7, and this is non-textured, but I still see lighting. Or I can hit 6 and 7, and then I get textures and lighting. Now, Brian Rose says, I noticed when switching between each shader, some toggle others off. Why is this? When switching between each shader, some toggle others off. I do not understand what you mean. You are speaking in some sort of code I do not understand. The rain is cold on Thursday. Okay, so moving along just for the time being. So those are the big buttons I want you to be aware of in terms of the viewport. You have 4 for wireframe, 5 for shaded, 6 for textured, and 7 for lit. Jot those down. 4 for wire, 5 for shaded, 6 for texture, 7 for lit. So make sure you know those. Now, there are a few other things about the viewport that we're going to talk about before we completely move away from it, but we've already been going on now for about an hour, so I want to take a quick 10-minute break, and then we will reconvene. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video, and then we will come back. So I will talk to you guys here in just a moment.